Hello and welcome to another episode of Jenny's Chateau Farm. This is a story of how, where, when and why we bought this estate. I have to admit that it is my husband who has been the driving force in this project. For many years he had been looking to buy somewhere outside of London and ended up looking in France. To begin with, he was looking in Normandy because we love Honfleur and have been there regularly over the past 10 years. Whilst I too love Honfleur with its beautiful ancient port, many art galleries and wonderful seafood restaurants, I was not sure I actually wanted to have a home there. The weather is a bit grey and rainy much of the year, and frankly not that much different from the UK, where we were. Plus, the 497 Second World War museums are not really my cup of tea, although my husband and son love them. What really did it, however, was the house prices. Normandy is quite an expensive part of France, so to get a property of the size we had in mind, it would have been beyond our budget. As my husband's house hunted started branching out further afield, past Brittany, past the damp and foggy Loire Valley, farther down the southwest coast, he discovered the Charente region, where prices are much more affordable. A lot more affordable. And significantly for me, there is much more sunshine. A lot more sunshine. The Charente region has a largely unexplained microclimate reaching in from the coastal town of La Rochelle to the Cognac region that gets around 2,600 sunshine hours per year. And during the summer, the sun is above the horizon for about 16 hours per day. Barcelona, by contrast, despite being about 700 kilometers south of us, surprisingly gets less sunshine, with about 2,500 hours per year, with an average of just 10 hours of sunshine per day in July. So, the warmer weather and blue skies of Charente was a big attraction for me. Yet at the same time, the Charente region is not so far south as to suffer the unbearably high heat of the south of France, where most of the population are scorpions and where houses can be devoured by termites. Another plus is that the coast is only an hour's drive away, with its wild beaches and historic forts. Yet the Cognac region is far enough inland not to have the high prices of coastal properties. As we look at more and more properties in the Cognac region, we were amazed at how much further our money could stretch. The size of properties, amount of land, and number of outbuildings increased dramatically. It was at this point that I started to get excited, as I could envisage having plenty of space for beautiful walled gardens, a potager, which is a kitchen garden, a yoga studio, enough bedrooms for plenty of guests to come to retreats, gîtes, which are self-contained rental accommodation, and all of this along with much needed space for my husband's work. So, we now had some answers. We now knew where we would be looking, in Charente or Charente-Maritime, possibly stretching inland to Vienne or Dordogne. We now knew what we were looking for, a large maison de maître or viticole. In short, an ex-wine-producing estate, where we would have the large house and outbuildings, but not the expensive vines. The hunt was on. From the relative safety of our home in London, my husband literally hoovered all the French property sites with the relevant house criteria and areas in mind. A couple of things make house hunting in France a little bit more difficult than in other countries. Firstly, agents are rarely exclusive, and many agents can be selling the same property, sometimes at different prices. Also, to prevent the prospective buyer from approaching the vendor directly and bypassing the agent's fees, no exact address is given for the location of each property. This makes it more difficult to compare travel times, assess the village, and can sometimes be downright deceptive. For example, we found one property that had a brand new racetrack being built next to it, but the racetrack was not mentioned in the advert, and other properties were right next to train lines, again, not mentioned in the adverts. This meant that my husband developed quite an advanced sense of geolocating with the help of landmarks such as bunches of trees, post boxes, gate posts, pools, cows, being matched against a target area in Google Earth before even adding them to our shortlist or even contacting an agent. Once you do have the location, however, the French system is really very good, and the aerial photos and online cadastre sites showing online property boundaries are all easily accessible to view online for you to make an informed decision. Following this process, the shortlist went from the hundreds down to the 50s, down to the top 10. All this during the worst of COVID restrictions, which made travelling between London and mainland Europe a nightmare, only mitigated by my husband's Swedish or European passport. I won't bore you with every single property we looked at, but I will go through the top 5 contenders, plus of course the one we bought. So, what criteria was in our search? Firstly, can the property accommodate what we want to do without being too large? In other words, for us, not a 55-bedroom chateau in the Loire Valley that would be a bottomless pit of potential. Secondly, transport. Whilst aware that a lonely property in the middle of a field or a forest might be cheaper, it makes it harder for my husband's clients to get to and from the property, and would make the logistics of my holistic events problematic. Thirdly, town, village or country. Neither of us wanted the property to be in a town, even ever so small. Nor did we want it to be completely alone in a forest or a field. So a village was perfect, and here's why. The French are lovely. In our experience, it's been absolutely amazing to have the backup, support, experience and friendship of the people in our village. In our village of Vaurouillac, they seem to be absolutely event mad, where not even one weekend can pass without doing something fun, including motor racing, pancake parties, hill climbs and festivals, all culminating with the annual September boxcar race. Even though our property is a farm, we are hooked up to the village sewage, gas and water, much like any suburban house. Fourthly, the level of renovation needed. The level of renovation will obviously affect the purchase price. As I will show you soon, we looked at the full scale, from the only thing being usable being the outer walls, to a key-ready property. The house we bought was somewhere in between. So now to the really interesting part. Here's our top 6 houses from our 2020 search, in reverse order. Number 6, which was near the village of Mons. This was a small house in a tiny hamlet in northern Charente. It was key ready to live in and renovated to a lovely standard, and was offered at a very good price at just over 200,000 euros. It also had a new pool. This property fell off the list for us simply due to its size and lack of outbuildings, and because the back wall of this property is shared with another property, which means that it has windows only on one side. Number 5, Chateau in Saint-Laurent. This one was, for a long time, my husband's absolute favourite. It is the classic viticole in prime cognac country, built around the manor house with the winery and stables forming a perfect quadrant, sold without the surrounding vines. It was originally built by Monsieur Martel, founder of the famous cognac house. With new roofs and a very good size, it was priced around 370,000 euros. Even though we were in constant contact with the agent, we couldn't, due to restrictions in travel, make a bid in time. It was sold to another family underneath my husband's property-sniffing nose. Not ever my favourite, I don't regret it being sold, but don't tell my husband. Number 4 is in Vindel, just outside the town of Angoulême. Very much like number 5 on our list, this house is also a complete quadrant viticole, with the main house being a very large maison de maître. That is, however, where the similarities end. Even though situated in a fantastic spot, very close to the Charente River, with land included going all the way to the riverbank, it was a complete renovation object from the ground up, and so it fell into the bottomless pit of potential category. No running water, no electricity, no sewage, and the roof was in an unknown state of repair. We did, however, absolutely love it. Priced at just under €500,000, we quickly realised that it needed at least another €500,000 just to be habitable, and probably another €500,000 after that to make it beautiful again. It did, however, come with something that we have taken with us and still use almost every evening in the summer. We found our perfect swimming spot in the river next to this house. Number 3, La Pérouse. For a long time, this was my favourite. It's also one of the smaller houses that we looked at. A typical maison de maître layout with a really nice sized barn, a very good sized pool, and a complete lettable gîte. It was very much an up and running business, although not 100% the kind of venture we were planning to have. We were very much in contact with both the agent and the owners, who were both extremely helpful, considering that for a long time we could not visit. We were given video tours and all the dimensions of rooms, attics and outbuildings, and we spent a lot of time making detailed drawings to evaluate if we could adopt this property to fit our needs. We did eventually make it out for an in-person viewing, but then something strange occurred. We didn't want it. The agent was lovely, the vendor was lovely, and the house was lovely. But in one of those old gut-feeling kind of scenarios, my husband and I both looked at each other and realized this wasn't the one. Number 2. Le Foyer in La Chapelle. So now we're getting close to home, so to speak. In Charente, and also close to the Charente River, we're now only about 15 minutes from the village where we eventually ended up. Le Foyer is again a large viticole. With fantastic outbuildings, there were many things with this property that we absolutely loved. And the agent, Sarah Edwards, was also fantastic and immensely helpful. The property itself is somewhat older than the others we looked at, and the main house is built en filade, which means that on the ground floor rooms you have to pass through each room to get to another, whilst the first floor bedrooms all use the same long back corridor. The house had been mildly renovated and sanitized, with all the rooms painted in the same matte white trade paint, and all furniture removed. We made several visits to this property, and it was a real contender. The price was close to €500,000, but it was in a very good state. There were some oddities regarding the land, but after talks with Sarah, most of them were straightened out. However, a very large portion of the included land was supposedly a dried-out lake. Going back in time over the historic cadastral pictures, however, we could not find any evidence of a former lake, just what is there today, which is something of a swamp, which was of little use to us nor anyone else, but may have come with some possible obligations for the future owner to keep it drained. In the end, this swayed us to keep looking.